All right, guys, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Greco. I'm a physical therapist I work for the Diamond Headache Inpatient Unit. I've been treating chronic headache for a long time, chronic pain for about 7-8 years, and chronic headache specifically, chronic migraine for 5 years. And I'm here to talk about exercise. So I'm here to talk about how we can have a more beneficial relationship with exercise and how we can partner that with migraine. I know that migraine and exercise can be a difficult relationship, so I'm going to go over the complexity of that. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll address them at the end. So let's just start with a preview of what migraine is and why exercise can be so challenging with it. Exercise with migraine can be so challenging because migraine is really a nervous system, an overexcitability of the nervous system, with many of you may not know, but trigeminal pathway specifically. But we talk about kind of an overexcitatory process. So that's why stress and anxiety, stimulation, let's say we go to the grocery store and there's a lot going on and there's ambient noises and lights and various visual stimulus, and sometimes that's why that can increase our migraine frequency and intensity. And so migraine tends to be worsened by high stimulus surroundings or anything that increases our nervous system, what's called excitability. And so when we look at exercise, one of the challenges can be that when we exercise, that excitability naturally increases with our intensity of exercise. And I'm sure many people have had the opposite effect, where exercise actually helps the pain. And so it can go either way. It can either make the pain worse or it can help the pain, right? And so when we look at that, we're first going to address when it makes it worse, what can we do? How can we partner with it? How can we make it work for us? So making it work for us, meaning we're not going to increase our pain, although we want to get all the benefits of exercise, including cardiovascular health. We know that a lot of migraine medications can impact cardiovascular function, impacting our mood, right? Exercise is really impactful for mood. Maybe we're working on getting a little bit healthier, looking at maybe getting our body in more an active shape, so moving around is a little bit easier, and all of the benefits that come with that. So So if we talk about exercise and when exercise can make the migraine pain worse, what we have to really look at is how we're measuring the intensity. So let's say we haven't worked out for a long time and we hop back into a really intense CrossFit class and we come home and our migraine is killing us later that night and we don't figure out why, because I had a really good time in that class and I just can't understand why. Or maybe I went to, I went on a walk with my friend and 20 minutes in, I just couldn't do anymore because my headache was increasing and I had to turn around. These are really real experiences and really reasonable things that can happen when we start working out or we start exercising, we start activity. So I'm going to start using the word activity instead of exercise, because I think activity is a more functional way of saying, let's just get moving in any way our body is allowing us to. I'm going to offer some options that can happen in specific movements and specific activities that can help with that. What we want to do is we want to moderate and monitor the intensity. So if I'm keeping it simple, let's say we haven't gone on a walk with our friend for 6 months and we're a little bit nervous about it and we're anticipating that this may increase our pain. What we want to do is we want to start maybe, hey, I'm gonna walk with you for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna go home and see how that goes. And if it goes well, maybe we can adjust our time as we go. And then you can start looking at, okay, how does that time look, right? Not jumping into 20 or 30 minutes right away, but starting at 5 or 10. Or maybe it's, I'm gonna do 5 minutes with you, and then I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna do a couple of my meditation breaths or really focused breathing to help my nervous system calm down a little bit if I'm breathing heavy, so that I can go then and do more exercise. Maybe do another 5 or 10 minutes after, and you can still enjoy that social interaction with that activity. The reason I talk about time frames is really about getting our body in a more calm state so it's not being escalated by the activity. One of the really positive impacts of exercise is an increase in heart rate. It can train our cardiovascular system in a way that's really helpful to keep us healthy. However, that increase in heart rate can also escalate that nervous system that I was talking about before. So if our nervous system activity is escalating because our heart rate is escalating, that means that maybe migraine is around the corner, right? So maybe as long as our heart rate goes up, then maybe what happens is that migraine, because of that escalation in nervous system activity of our sympathetic nervous system, maybe what happens then is our pain starts to increase. And that's not our goal. So one way that we can measure it is by measuring our heart rate. So one rule of thumb that I use with my patients is I say, I want you to increase your heart rate by 15 to 20%. So if, from your resting heart rate. So if your resting heart rate is, let's say, 80 or 90, so I want you to try keeping it under 100 or 90, 95, 100 and see how your body responds to that. Now that may require a heart rate monitor or maybe a smartwatch, something of that nature. But as you know, when you start to monitor that heart rate, you can actually start monitoring how intense that activity is, and that actually gives you some information in how your body is tolerating that activity. If so if you're going for that 10-minute walk, can you moderate your intensity so that your heart rate stays under 100 or 95, right? So that maybe your body can tolerate that better. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of hard examples because this is such an individualized journey. Maybe some people are starting at running. I want to run 5 miles, and that's great. But let's start with seeing how you can walk for maybe a mile or two. The key to this is really being successful, right? We want to train our heart to be successful without the additional pain. So start small and work bigger with exercise if we've had an experience where pain starts to increase with exercise. As we continue to move forward, I want to talk a little bit about some types of exercise that can be paired with this exercise modification, right? Because what we're really talking about is pacing and spacing, so making sure that you're moderating your exercise. I want to talk a little bit about yoga and a little bit about Tai Chi. I think those two are really, really good activities that can be easily modified. Yoga can be done in a chair. It can be done standing. And, one thing that if we have any yogis watching, one thing that we know is that yoga is a practice. It's not something that we're not going to perform. Unfortunately, sometimes we look at that person that's ahead of us in class or one of our friends that's saying, I'm trying to do this pose, and we could want that for ourselves. Well, yoga, what it's really about is where we're at in that moment, in that day. And one thing that yoga pairs really well with activity or mobility is breath. And breath is incredibly important in successful exercise. If we are not moderating our breath in a mindful, purposeful way, we may be more apt to struggle. A mindful attention to breath can include really pacing your breath, so breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. And if we're purposeful about it, what's happening is we talked about that sympathetic nervous system that we want not so active for the sake of migraine. That can activate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which now we're getting a little bit more balance, a little bit more regulation, so that again, our pain levels can be moderated and that we can actually have the benefit of exercise without the burden of pain. The other thing the other activity is Tai Chi. I don't know if any of you have done Tai Chi before. It's a little less popular than yoga. Yoga is really helpful. And remember, when you're doing yoga or Tai Chi, that you should be doing it in a way that you can be successful. So if you are having a hard time, there's nothing wrong with sitting in child's pose, right? Or if you get dizzy often or easily, Maybe staying away from those inverted where your head is below your hips movements. It may not be nice to your dizziness. So maybe stay away from that in the beginning and then slowly test it out to see what your brain and your body can tolerate. Again, building your body up for success. In a lot of ways we can think about this as training a marathon. We don't start at 26.2 miles. We start easier, right? We start with something that we can be successful with. We get injured if we go straight to 26.2. And that's what that pain can be. It can do something to our brain that is not productive for our goals. So if we go into Tai Chi, this can be a really restorative opportunity to let our body movement without significant cognitive participation. If any of you guys are like me, I think a ton, and that can get in the way sometimes. So getting in the way, thoughts getting in the way of movement and not allowing your body and listening to your body and what it's telling you can unfortunately be unproductive when it's paired with exercise. So Tai Chi is the natural order of movement. It's peaceful, it's restorative, and it's not very, it allows our body to move in a way with grace and in a way that it's designed to move. Both of these are Eastern, and both of them are designed for healing. And that's why I think those two are good, is because we can get movement without having the burden of additional intensity that's not always necessary. Again, I really want to harp on the fact that being successful is really where this can be. So I want to talk a little bit how we can define success with exercise and activity, and why it's so important. As we struggle with any sort of disease, including migraine, what happens over time is our brain slowly starts to change. And so as our brain slowly starts to change, all of a sudden pain unfortunately comes in a little bit easier. So something that we were able to do 5 years ago may not be realistic in this moment, but what can we do today successfully in this moment? And then we can kind of chip away at how our brain has developed these patterns of movement, and we can chip away at those unproductive patterns that our brain has learned into more productive ventures. One way that we can do that is what I talked about earlier, is in the pacing and spacing, and how we can structure our exercise by breaking it down into different arenas and setting really, really concrete and structured goals. The goals are making sure that you can achieve them, and it's okay if it's easy the first time. It's okay that if you walked 5 minutes, or you did 5 minutes of yoga, or you did 15 minutes of Tai Chi, or you did something that maybe in the beginning we didn't deem it as what our goal was for the long term, but we're breaking it down, working towards that goal, so that eventually maybe our goal is to complete a yoga class, and maybe that we can do that, right? By starting with 5 minutes of yoga and then establish a plan on how we tolerate that. We live in a world full of yes and no's, goods and bads, blacks and whites, yes and no's, you said that one. Things that can be very concrete and don't allow a lot of opportunity for flexibility, don't allow of opportunity for creativity, don't allow a lot of opportunity for individualization. And what I've noticed over time is that we can do that to ourselves with all of these really rigid exercise plans. And having a structure is important, right? Having a structure and a goal, and to have a schedule of that. So maybe month 1, I'm working from 5 to 10 minutes. Month 2, I'm working from 10 to 15, so on and so forth. Or maybe it's week 1, week 2, right? There is no design. It's how we're tolerating it. And so we have to respond to how we tolerate it. If we did 5 minutes and our pain increased, I might say go back down to 3, right? I might ask, where's your heart rate at? How is your heart rate interfering with that time, right? So when we're looking at how we're looking at that structure, and then how do we operate inside of that, right? If something doesn't go as well as we designed it or as well as we hoped, that's information for the next time to make a more informed decision to help us be more successful in the future. One of the things that I use is, we talk about black and white thinking, concrete thinking, and how that can impact exercise, is that, again, we're like, oh, we need 20 minutes for this cardiovascular benefit, which is true. We do need 20 to 30 minutes of continuous cardiovascular exercise within a 60 to 80% of our heart rate, and that's what the evidence says, and that's fine. But if we can't get there on day one, there's no reason to be disappointed. Doesn't mean you can't get there on later, right? Working towards that goal is what we want to look at. So just because we can't do that today doesn't mean we can't do that down the road and be successful with it. And how we make that work for us, right? So looking at that playing in the gray, I'm full of like cheeky sayings. Playing in the gray is something that can really, really be helpful, right? In our creativity and how we find out what's working for us and what's not. Maybe going to a physical therapist and having them kind of help you through that process, or having someone who's familiar with exercise in a non-competitive way, and having someone to partner with to hold each other accountable can be really helpful in being able to navigate, okay, I want to do this, but this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, what do you think? Okay, all right, yeah, maybe I should take it a little bit easier today. Or another thing to think about is maybe it's not time to push your exercise if you have a busy day ahead of you. If you have, unfortunately within COVID right now, so busyness is a little bit less, but let's say we have a birthday party, or we have to go grocery shopping, or we have to make a big meal, like maybe we should do something nice to ourselves earlier in the day so that we can be successful later in the day, right? So that's pacing and spacing, making sure that we're allowing ourselves a relative break so that we can be successful in the activities where we need to be successful. This perfectly aligns with exercise as well, or activity as well. As you know, looking at so that's exercise when it's hard, right? That's exercise when the pain increases and we don't know how we can achieve it, and we become demoralized in a lot of ways, and that sense of disappointment unfortunately creates a more narrow version of opportunity and success in our brain. But if we expand that opportunity and create more a wider definition of success for us, then maybe we can look at it. Maybe, look, I'm getting closer to that goal and I didn't even know it. And look, hey, I'm getting somewhere where I want to be. If we just focus on the destination, unfortunately, we're bound to be in trouble. Living in that journey and seeing where we're at each day is really where we can find ourselves to be successful with activity. Monitoring that heart rate on a regular basis, looking at our intensity, at our time, at our speed, and allowing ourselves rest breaks, and being nice to ourselves, and understanding that this isn't an overnight task. This really is a journey, and it's something that we're invested in learning about, right? I'm in school right now for a different degree, and an extension of a degree, and one of the things one of my professors said was, if you're comfortable, you're not learning, right? Being uncomfortable and not knowing is okay. Sometimes asking questions really is what it's about. And knowing all the answers, that's just pretend. Really about asking the right questions, and unfortunately, what we have to do sometimes is dive into that and start somewhere, hopefully smaller, and then we start to develop questions and then get more information about how this can be successful for us. So for the people that really enjoy exercise, and maybe it helps them feel better, or maybe it's something that they would like to get back to and they just don't know how it's going to go, one thing I will say about that is, even if it doesn't always make you feel better, activity is so healthy for the mind, body, and spirit, right? The mood can increase, so if it doesn't increase your pain, we should look at maybe doing a little bit of activity, whether it's chair yoga, maybe it's walking around the house, maybe it's simply doing marches during commercial breaks. Something is better than nothing. So if we find ourselves stuck in bed, and it's hard to get out, which I know a lot of us have had those days, where maybe even rotating our feet side to side, and then eventually getting up, sitting up at the side of the bed, and then eventually maybe going up and getting ourselves a glass of water. If we think about that original task of getting a glass of water, it can really overwhelm us. Or maybe it's I have to go to dinner, or I have an engagement with a friend of mine, and the idea of actually being at the restaurant is incredibly overwhelming, and we don't know how to get there. What we can do is, okay, I'm in bed, I don't feel great, my head is not great, I don't see how this is going to be successful. maybe I'll just sit up and see how I feel, see if anything is worse. Okay. And then maybe I'll get up and, okay, I got to take a shower, and that's kind of overwhelming. So I'm just going to go turn on the water. I'm just going to turn it on, see how it goes, and then I'll reassess there, right? So these are days that are a little bit tougher, days that are a little bit more painful, but we can do, hopefully our body allows us to do something. And if it doesn't increase your pain, it's a positive thing. We know that pain can stick around, and we know that our motivation sometimes can be not always where we want it to be. And all of that is okay. And we're allowed to take breaks, and we're allowed to have days for ourselves. And being nice to ourselves through this process includes just seeing what we're capable of that day. It doesn't mean we always have to make it out to meet the friend. Or maybe it means, hey, can we not do dinner, or can we not do lunch? Can we just maybe do a cup of coffee? Or, you know, if you feel safe with them and you want to invite them over to your home in the times of COVID, that's appropriate too, to make that easier for you. But you still get to engage your brain and have it process some stimulus, so that as you continue to move forward, it will be a little bit less steep of a hill to climb as you get back. Thank you guys, everybody. My name is Mark Greco. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you for the time. I really, really appreciate it.